Green, white, green, very promising colors for Nigeria, but how have those colors actually translated into the narrative for Nigeria today? Well, we're looking at keeping Nigeria one and the issue of restructuring very much on the front burner. Now, for decades, many Nigerians have clamored for change, not only for reworking the constitution, but also re-engineering the revenue-sharing formula, as well as power rotation.
Indeed, well, words like devolution of power, true fiscal federalism as well, and restructuring, regionalism, and more have become common rhetorics in debates across various divides. Now, today, voices that were once silent are now loud, that governments once timid are now politically aggressive.
Now, many advocates of more power to state governments seem to be winning an age-long battle. Will restructuring Nigeria be in its best interest? We'll find out, of course, from our guest who is joining us in the studio right now. He is Alfred Kemekpado, the General Secretary or Secretary General of the Joy Youth Council Worldwide. Good morning, and thanks for joining us, and happy Independence.
Happy Independence. Thanks for having me. Good morning to the viewers at home too.
Maybe we should even start like this, since we're still in the independence mood. 57 years of nationhood. How independent do you think the Nigerian nation really is, especially when you look at the constituents, the Nigerian? How independent is the Nigerian?
Oh yeah, we're proudly not independent, obviously so.
Did you say proudly not independent?
Yeah, obviously so for many reasons. Yeah, we're an independent country, but dependent so much on the particles of politics outside of the shores of this country in terms of, I'm talking about economic politics and the rest of the divides. As independent as we claim to be, like people proudly say and loudly say, even the toothpick that we use here is still imported. And this has been the rhetorics over the years. And we need to be independent both in our economics, in our politics, and in everything. So we need to begin to style ourselves, to begin to suit ourselves, to begin to fend for ourselves, to begin to take good care of ourselves and engage in our conversation the way we want to do it, to prosper the nation the way we want to do it.
All right, so Nigeria has never been this divided really since its history, and this happening at the time that the country is enjoying years of democratic rule. So it calls for worry really, and that is according to many analysts, and many have called for restructuring. But when you look at how the calls have grown, you see that in one region it's very loud, in another region it's being killed. So as a Nigerian, first off now, do you really want Nigeria to be restructured, and how, what kind of restructuring would you prefer if yes?
Definitely so. Like I had said in many programs, the Nigerian conversation has to be on the deck. If that is what you mean by restructuring, yes, and that is what restructuring means. You know, restructuring will mean many things to many other people, but what we need to know as Nigerians is to understand that at every point in time we need to keep the Nigerian conversation on the deck. What are we getting right? What are we getting wrong? And try to see how we can correct it. This is what happens in other climes. You get what I'm trying to say? So if you bring it, if you rule it down to where we are in Nigeria today, we need to begin to ask that we call ourselves a federal republic. Are we really truly federal? The present system of calling ourselves a federal republic and where states are supposed to be independent and prospering along comparative advantages according to what they can do separately at different times that will contribute to the well-being of the entire country. We are not doing that. Instead, everybody is depending on the so-called proverbial big head called the federal government, where something comes and at the end of the month it shares to other things. So you just get to understand that Nigeria needs restructuring. Now, if you take it, if you look at prosperous nations in the world that we want to be like the nations, but we don't want to do what they do. You look at countries like the United States. The prosperity of the United States does not actually come from the federal government per se. It comes from the constituent, the other components of that federated United States you talk about. Let me give you an example. In 2016, the trade exchange between the city of Houston, Texas and Nigeria is just about $16 billion. $16 billion is about the budget of Nigeria as at that particular point in time. Now, you get to understand that now the prosperity of Houston is also different from the prosperity of California, another place where you have oil, the Hollywooding, and other things. Take it to even So you get what I'm trying to say. So here in Nigeria, we're talking about trying to restructure the country in a way that every part of this country is becoming more productive, rather than making a center that is unproductively assumed to be productive and weighing down its unproductivity on other components.
So obviously the call for restructuring seems to be opening a new vista, a new page for the Nigerian nation. Nigeria turned 57 yesterday. Before independence, there was a call for independence. You had Nigerians, it didn't matter which ethnic group or religious, leanings they had. They all fought one common enemy, which was, being held down by the colonial masters. Now, how did we get it wrong in such a way that we all now seem to be working against each other's interest instead of warring or fighting for the that common goal? I guess the word that's missing is patriotism.
It's not just patriotism. Patriotism is anchored on many factors. You also look at issues of injustice. You understand? So how do you talk about patriotism when the man in the Niger Delta feels that the man who is from the north or any other part of the country who does not know, who does not understand or know the color of the crude oil is the one who owns the crude oil beside his mother's grave? That's far away from patriotism. So when you talk about patriotism, we must talk about equity, we must talk about fairness, we must talk about justice, we must talk about a system that accommodates everybody. Now, I'm not here to speak for the Igbos. How do you take care of the man who sits in the East and feels that psychologically, just like the black American who had felt that he will never rule America, the average Igbo man feels that the politics of this country has taken him out of the line that he may never become president. So you can't be talking about patriotism when you have that kind of moral injustice infused into the system. How do you talking about? These things are not just peculiar to the Easterners, the Southerners, or the Niger Deltas and everybody. Even if you go to the North, as united as they seem, the poverty that reigns even in the North is even more than here. So before you talk about patriotism, the country and the leadership of the country has to be first patriotic to the country by leading sacrificially and showing the way and putting the square pegs in square holes. Let me give you an example. You see, you don't talk about patriotism when we are divided along economic lines. You don't talk about patriotism when we have a whole lot of religious intolerance that is accommodated.
But do we know where there's divisions, or who brought about these divisions? I guess we'll have to take a quick
commercial
break. When we come back, we'll break it down even further. Stay with us.
Glad to have you back. How far so far? We are looking at Nigeria's 57 years of independence and the growing calls for restructuring, the need to chart a new course for the country, to get a new identity that will unify all Nigerians across boards. We still have in the studio with us the Secretary General of the Ijaw Youth Council Worldwide, Alfred Kemepado. Thank you for staying with us. Now, does it seem to you that Nigeria's problems or challenges seem to be more political than the economic challenges the country is experiencing?
Definitely they are more political, but it's aimed on economics too. But we can't be talking about economics without politics. But they are more political. We need to get sincerity right in the part of leadership. We need to be, like you said, more patriotic. And so it's more political than economics. So if we fix the politics, I think the economic will come by.
So there should be, or do you think there should be some form of a conscious orientation or reorientation of Nigerians? Like we were talking earlier before we had you on the set about the need for the Nigerian dream as being postulated by some speakers on radio yesterday. That American dream, of course, even Africans know about the American dream, what they attempt to seem to identify their country with, and wake up every morning and say, God bless America. But so, how should the government go about this right now? The need to unite all Nigerians. How should it go about it? Because many are accusing the president of,
dividing the country, more or less.
I think rightly so, because I think the president got it right when he said he belongs to nobody and he belongs to everybody on the day of his inauguration. But the president has also got it so wrong in his acts, you understand, in the areas of appointment where you have to sectionalize almost all appointments from one particular region in the areas of speeches that were made by his aides and all of that. So, but you see, let's not dwell too much on how he has got it wrong in these places. He needs to go back to his initial statement that unites the whole of Nigeria. Look at the president's speech yesterday, the Independence Day speech yesterday, where he had to systematically describe a group of people as unfortunately irresponsible. That was totally unnecessary, you understand? It wasn't called for. You see, as President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, yes, it's good to be the commander-in-chief, even in the discharge of your words, but at this particular point in time in the country, what the country needs is words that are healing. You understand? People are agitated for reasons he understands. I am very glad to have heard in his speech that he was a young soldier when the other war took place. So if he was a young soldier, highly ranked, the president should have been experienced to understand that these wars came by as a result of forms of injustices that were felt. So it is not for the president to remind or threaten the mentality of people with another war. It is the responsibility of the president, especially for the age and stage he has attained in life, to speak healing to the nation. It is for the president not to describe people as irresponsible, but to know that it is his total responsibility to ensure that everybody is responsible in the areas of justice, in the areas of equity, in the areas of fairness, to ensure that what he fought for as a young soldier, he does not experience it again as an elderly person, or even when he's gone. So, we need a whole lot of this mix in this country.
But really, I mean, you talk about the need for healing words, but have we really been able to identify or do a correct or proper diagnosis of what the ailment, what really ails Nigeria? You said earlier, in the Southeast, they're crying marginalization. The South, the same thing. Even in the North, they're crying marginalization. So who is marginalizing who? Is it a case of political mismanagement that really is at the root of Nigeria's problem? Beyond...
It's a case of many things put together that you may not be able to solve in the next 50 years. But there is a point to start.
Where do we start?
Now, where do we start? Everybody is clamoring for restructuring. We have all said and we have all agreed at different stages in the face of this country that the present structure of the country is faulty. We call ourselves a federal republic, yet we run a kind of unitary system. That we need to begin to develop this country from its regions. Every person, every part of this country needs to begin to tackle its problems with its peculiarities. Do you understand? Take the Niger Delta, for example.
Are we not just re-echoing? Are we not in danger of just re-echoing the word restructuring? I mean, restructuring in itself, yes, sounds good, but there are some who would argue that there's a need for us to restructure our minds. That if you have political restructuring, economic restructuring, and all the restructuring possible without changing the mindset of the people, it doesn't really matter what system you operate. Britain, for example, runs an unwritten constitution. It doesn't even have a constitution, yet the country runs.
Now, listen to me. Now, you need to now understand when we say restructuring. Don't run away from the phrase restructuring. When you say, you have just stated here that we need to restructure our mind. If I need to take a jab...
I'm only re-echoing what some
let me just
said.
take a jab at it. That's why sometimes, I don't want to criticize any particular ministry, but sometimes I begin to wonder what the ministry and the Minister of Information in Nigeria does. Now, let me tell you something. For a nation anywhere or for a society to develop, it develops first from its mindsets. This has been proven, it has been tested. If you go back to history, statistics, and the storyline, the records will show that at a particular point in time, our GDP, the GDP of Ghana and other countries were at par with some other countries around the world, like Singapore and others. And how these countries developed is because at a particular point in time, there was a jab at the restructuring of their mindset, which now made these countries begin to look at things from a different way. So now, bringing that to the Nigerian case, now I look at the Ministry of Information and Culture, with due respect to the minister. The duty of that ministry is not to re-echo what the president says, even if that is not bad. Additional and others are there to do that. The ministry should have been tailored. The ministry should have been concentrating on what it takes to restructure the perception of Nigeria, the mindset
Isn't that the responsibility of the National Orientation Agency and not the Minister
It's a parastatal under that ministry.
Of course, there's an institution for that.
It's a parastatal under that ministry. That's why I'm calling the ministry. Do you understand me? The ministry also has Nigerian Television Authority, another sister organization. So that's that. But I don't know what they are doing. But that's for that. But coming back to the main issue of restructuring, which we shouldn't run away from. Now, you may have made reference to Britain, their mindsets and everything. You don't talk about the mindset of even your child at home without talking about the kind of foundations and the kind of schools and the kind of environments you're exposed to. The socio-political environment that Nigeria is exposed to is so faulty. We have described ourselves as a federal republic that should have grown from all areas. But that has been bastardized.
But what about the state governments, really? Their rules, what they have done so far. Former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who of course said that there is need for a change of mindset, restructuring of the mind first of, like she said. He said on Friday as well, on Thursday, that state governors that are calling for devolution of powers shouldn't talk like that, because in fact they have the powers, but how have they been accountable to their people
so far?
So if you want to venture out and say that give me more, first off, prove that you have utilized what you've been given. And what we've seen so far in Nigeria isn't really
I totally will never agree with former President Olusegun Obasanjo, with due respect to him. You see, he has only answered the question from behind. The question should have been, give the state governments more responsibility to own themselves. Let me give you an example. Today, the whole of the country is depending on the Niger Delta, from the oil that comes from there. But let me tell you something. One of the highest foreign earners to a country like Mexico, to a country like India, a country like Brazil, is this nomadic rascality, beef. So we are beginning to talk about a country that every country begins to look at what it has and begin to develop from there. It will shock you that there are state governments in this country that will even develop a cleaner, a better economy, more than the oil economy. Let me give you an example. Now, we have a country where about the only functional seaports you have is here in Lagos.
Yes.
It's disservice to this country. You have states like River State, with so much river that you call it River State. You have states like Delta State, Bayelsa State, which is just 45 minutes from the Gulf of Guinea, and you are not developing the seaports from that environment. You have other states with comparative advantage bordering to the north and the south.
And that's why I asked if state governments have been able to articulate the plight of their people first.
The state governments cannot articulate the plight of it because the structure in which we operate makes them dependent. That is why we're asking for restructuring. Now, let me tell you something. If you restructure a place like the Niger Delta, a place like Bayelsa, where I come from, we may not have to even depend on oil to sustain. Our real wealth is in the ocean. When Jimmy Agbaje was campaigning here in Lagos, he was talking about the ocean economy. You understand? Our real wealth is in the ocean. And records have it. Countries like Dubai, you understand me? Countries like Dubai have moved away from oil. They are talking about tourism. Absolutely. Tell me, everything Dubai has artificially, we have it naturally in the Niger Delta.
So what
the estuaries,
yes.
And so now what former President Olusegun Obasanjo is saying, he is saying it from the present structure of a unitary system where it's feeding. He should have been saying it from every state developing at its pace. Are you not aware that there are countries in this world that are so prosperous and all they have is desert and oranges?
Absolutely.
Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So we are gradually moving into a country that is facing a norm that is unproductive.
So how can we then, come up with whatever ideas or ideologies that we want to come up with without looking at them through ethnic or religious eyes, because that seems to be getting in the way of us achieving whatever we want to achieve as a nation.
And regions seems to be suspicious of one another.
Absolutely.
You'll benefit.
And some would even tell you the issue of devolution of powers. Yes, governors, who many of them are now in the National Assembly. While they were governors, they called for devolution of powers. They asked for more powers. But only for them to get into the Senate, and they're saying, no, we're not too sure about this whole devolution.
Where you are at the time.
Exactly. So how can we get it right? The real issue here is actually keeping Nigeria one.
No. See, the truth is, we have to keep Nigeria one.
Yes.
I'm not for any secessionist agenda for now.
Yeah.
But how we live in that Nigeria as one must be negotiated. How the person from the north, how the person that is A and B live together in that one Nigeria must be negotiated. This is also in the various marriages we have at home. You understand? It must be negotiated, but we must live at one. But however, that doesn't mean that the federal government or anybody in power, you understand, should begin to provoke a particular session to begin to do what is not expected. Because after all, everybody has a right under the charters that we have to call for a referendum, and that is not peculiar to Nigeria. You may have seen what is going on in Spain. You may have seen what went on in the UK recently in Cameroon and other things. So the truth is, we need to keep the Nigerian conversation a bit more sincere.
Maybe we should take it from the education aspect of it, where you talked about, you know, what are we really teaching the young Nigerian that is born today? Maybe we should go back to teaching them patriotism.
All right, thank you very much. Keeping Nigeria one is a task that indeed must be done. Thank you for your analysis at this time. Alfred Kemepadu, you are the Secretary General of Ijaw Youth Council Worldwide. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.